Hey everybody, what you're about to see is a class that is available on the Payments Professor website. This is a class that goes into detail on all the different rules changes that are happening in 2021. If you'd like more, go to paymentsprofessor.com. Hey everybody, are you ready to keep the meaningful modernization moving along? Thought I was going to say take the ache out of ACH rules and changes, didn't you? Ha! No. It's time to keep meaningful modernization moving along. We covered an introduction to what meaningful modernization is in the previous class. We went over the 5 rules that it encompasses, and we went into detail on the standing authorization and even subsequent entries. Now it's time to move on, and we're going to move on to the oral authorization. This rule defines and allows oral authorizations as a valid authorization method for consumer debits beyond when the authorization is obtained during a phone call. See, historically, the TEL SEC code has covered the requirements and addressed the risk specific to an oral authorization, but it has been specific to an authorization that is obtained during a telephone call. And guess what? Technology is advanced, and I mean it continues to advance. And we are seeing so many more and newer methods and even channels of making use of voice-related technologies. And the meaningful modernization oral authorization recognizes these new technologies and these new methods and is addressing them. The new rule says that any oral authorization obtained regardless of the channel needs to meet the requirements of an oral authorization. So it's not just for the telephone anymore. Any oral authorization, regardless of the channel. Got it? Also, it is important to note that an oral authorization obtained over the internet that is not a telephone call must also meet the risk and security requirements that apply to web entries. And therefore, you should use the web SEC code. Now, when making these voice payments and obtaining these oral authorizations, there are still security requirements that must be met, meaning that when the receiver's oral authorization is communicated over an unsecured electronic network and not over a telephone call, the originator must comply with the existing security requirements that we see in Section 1.7 for secure transmission of ACH information via unsecured electronic networks. There will still be and is going to be the retention and proof of authorization requirements like we've already seen. The oral authorization rule specifies that an originator's obligation for proof of authorization for an oral authorization is, first of all, the original or duplicate audio recording for a recurring entry, and second of all, the original or duplicate audio recording or a copy of the written notice for a single entry. Whew, those of you studying for the AAP, make sure you understand that one. It can get a little confusing. And other authorization sections of meaningful modernization help to give us flexibility in the network, as the rules help to reorganize the general authorization rules to better incorporate standing authorizations and oral authorizations. It also is further or better defining recurring entry to complement existing definitions of single entry and the proposed new definition of subsequent entry to make sure everything aligns with terms in Regulation E. This particular rule also explicitly states that authorization of an ACH payment can be made by any method allowed by law or regulation, and that it is only for consumer debit authorizations. And speaking of authorizations, what about some proof of authorization changes that we're seeing in the meaningful modernization? Have you ever been in a situation where it would just be so much easier to accept a return back rather than to having to go dig up an authorization and provide it when it's requested? It happens, right? Well, the alternative to proof of authorization rule is going to allow an ODFI to agree to accept a return of an entry as an alternative to providing proof of authorization. So let's say we have an RDFI that requests a proof of authorization for consumer debit. The ODFI then has the option, and they must exercise this option within 10 banking days. You don't get all the time in the world. You got 10 banking days. But they have the option to either provide a proof of authorization or to just agree to accept the return. Pretty simple, right? Pretty easy. Now, if the ODFI chooses to accept the return, the RDFI will have 10 banking days to make that return happen. They don't get all the time in the world either. But, I said but, and this is a big but, if the RDFI still needs and wants the proof of authorization, the RDFI will still have the ability to obtain it from the ODFI, and when the RDFI is insisting upon having the proof of authorization, then the ODFI must provide proof within 10 banking days to the RDFI's subsequent request. So if they insist upon having a proof of authorization, you're going to have to give it to them and do so within 10 banking days. It's a pretty simple rule if you ask me. If you want, you can choose to just accept a return and you don't have to provide a proof of authorization. But if the RDFI insists, you will then have to be able to provide a proof of authorization. Now, let's go on to the final portion of the 5 rules that make up meaningful modernization. And the last and the final one, that's written statement of unauthorized debit via electronic or oral methods. What's this rule in there for? I thought we already had some of that stuff. Well, this rule clarifies and makes explicit that an RDFI may obtain a consumer's written statement of unauthorized debit, or WSUD, electronically or orally. What do you mean? People have already been doing this. Yeah, they have, but we now have additional clarification that is being added to the rules that a consumer is permitted to sign a WSUD with an electronic signature. Pretty simple change that just says explicitly that you can obtain a WSUD electronically and you can use an electronic signature on the WSUD. Not much to that one, all right? If you're doing electronic WSUDs, the rule's just giving the clarification that it's okay to be able to do that. Again though, all the rules within Meaningful Modernization, they go into effect when? September 17th, 2021. And like I have said throughout this entire course, there is a lot happening in the world of ACH in 2021. And the Payments Professor is here to help you take the ache out of ACH. But this is where our journey comes to a conclusion. What do you think about all these new rules that are happening this year? What do you think about the meaningful modernization of ACH? And a really important question, are you ready for the Payments Professor's Pop Quiz? The quiz that is meant to review and reinforce all of the really important information. I hope so, because that's in the next class. For now, class dismissed. So, what did you think about that particular class? What did you think about all those new rules and new updates? And if you missed part of the class, you can always go to the Payments Professor website to learn more about what's happening. We have all kinds of courses out there about all kinds of different things, electronic payments, and we are here to serve and help you. We even have some things that are out on our YouTube channel. If you want to go there, please subscribe if you do go there. Or if there's a class or maybe a course you'd like to have created, you can always email me, kevin@paymentsprofessor.com. And like I said at the end of that class, I got to say it again, class dismissed.